Welcome to another episode of Changing Lives. Now, today we're talking about the representational system, and I'm a bit intrigued with this one because we're talking about the importance of sense. And for me, I immediately default to touch. But you say it's way more than that, Tanya.
Well, the representational systems are the following. So there's audio, there's visual, and there's what we call kinesthetic. All right. So visual people often see things. They'll watch the whole sunset. They'll look for anomalies in an environment. They'll notice the crooked painting. And it's interesting, a visual person, when you ask them a question, will actually look up. So they'll look up to the left or they'll look up to the right. Then you get somebody who's very auditory. Words and information and sounds, they're very aware of it. So, for example, if somebody's incredibly auditory and they're listening to music while they study, that's a good thing because it helps to distract that sense so that they're able to take in the information utilizing their other senses. And auditory people will tend to look towards their ears when they're thinking. So they'll go, and they'll look to the left, and they'll look to the right. And so they will use their eyes as a visual cue. Then you get the kinesthetics. Kinesthetics, so I'm an auditory kinesthetic, and kinesthetic people feel emotionally and they feel physically. So I cannot wear something scratchy. I'll cut the label off the back of my shirt, for example, because it'll scratch my skin and it'll worry me so much that I can't wear it. But I also feel and I sense. And it's a very sensory type of personality profile. So as I've said, I'm an audio kinesthetic. So you can be a mix of two. You could even be an equal of all three. But some people are definitively one. So in my groups, what I normally do is I look to see what my groups are. So if I've got a group for 5 days in one of my workshops, I identify who is in my room. First thing I do, because then I can keep my room engaged the entire time because I know who my audios are, who my visuals are, and who my kinesthetics are. So if I've got somebody who is drawing, for example, while I'm busy speaking, and I've identified that they're a kinesthetic, that's when they're listening to me. So if I went up to that person and took the pen and I put it down, I've lost them. Or if somebody is looking at me when I'm speaking to them, I know that they're visual, but they might be looking down to the left or they might be looking down, and I've got them because they're listening to me. If I go look at me when I speak to you, I've lost them. So you disengage your primary sense sometimes to actually concentrate, which is really fascinating. So understanding what your representational system is, and representational system basically is how you take in the world. So your brain obviously lives in a little dark alcove, right? And the only way it takes in the world is through its senses. Now, if we want to see if somebody is remembering and they're right-handed, and you ask them a question, they will look to the left if they're remembering, and they will look to the right if they're imagining the future. If they're left-handed, it's the other way around, and if they need both of them, then obviously you can't tell. But these tips and skills are really great to know when you are working in an environment like sales, for example, leadership, or working with children. You know, you can actually tell a lot from these visual cues when you're working with children. Have you ever used any of these in your life?
You know, as you're speaking, I'm literally realize that I'm visual because I look up whenever I ask a question. So yeah, I think we use them on a day-to-day basis, but I would imagine that it poses a bit of a risk, and we keep on talking about the idea of schooling. Because if I am, let's say, one of those students who looks away, for example, that might be deemed as disrespectful, and we really need to start teaching these skills that you're talking about.
Absolutely. So school particularly needs to learn that we have different types of people. School failed us. If more than 90% of the scholars couldn't get a straight A, who failed? Look at it like that, right? So the only way that we actually are able to work conclusively, I can get a classroom of 25 people, regardless if they're ADHD, to learn my material because I talk directly to their representational system.
Now that we know what everything's about, just wrap it up for us to learn more about the representational system.
There are assessments that can be done, and you can identify definitively what your representational systems are.
Fantastic. What an interesting chat. Make sure you figure out where you fall within the representational system.